Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Russian Federation and the President of the United States. Дамы и господа, Президент Российской Федерации и Президент Соединенных Штатов. Mesdames et Messieurs, le Président de la Fédération de Russie et le Président des États-Unis.
Good afternoon. I have just completed 2 days of intensely productive discussions with President Boris Yeltsin. I want to join him in thanking Prime Minister Mulroney and the people of Canada for their hospitality. The beauty of Vancouver has inspired our work here, and this weekend I believe we have laid the foundation for a new democratic partnership between the United States and Russia. The heroic deeds of Boris Yeltsin and the Russian people launched their reforms toward democracy and market economies and defended them valiantly during the dark days of August in 1991. Now it is the self-interest and the high duty of all the world's democracies to stand by Russia's democratic reforms in their new hour of challenge. The contrast between our promising new partnership and our confrontational past underscores the opportunities that hang in the balance today. For 45 years, we pursued a deadly competition in nuclear arms. Now we can pursue a safe and steady cooperation to reduce the arsenals that have haunted mankind. For 45 years, our nation invested trillions of dollars to contain and deter Soviet communism. Now the emergence of a peaceful and democratic Russia can enable us to devote more to our own domestic needs. The emergence of a newly productive and prosperous Russia could add untold billions in new growth to the global economy. That would mean new jobs and new investment opportunities for Americans and our allies around the world. We are investing today not only in the future of Russia, but in the future of America as well. Mr. President, our nation will not stand on the sidelines when it comes to democracy and Russia. We know where we stand. We are with Russian democracy. We are with Russian reforms. We are with Russian markets. We support freedom of conscience and speech and religion. We support respect for ethnic minorities. We actively support reform and reformers and you in Russia. The ultimate responsibility for the success of Russia's new course, of course, rests with the people of Russia. It is they who must support economic reforms and make them work. But Americans know that our nation has a part to play too, and we will do so. In our discussions, President Yeltsin and I reached several important agreements on the ways in which the United States and the other major industrialized democracies can best support Russian reforms. First are programs that can begin immediately. I discussed with President Yeltsin the initiatives totaling $1.6 billion intended to bolster political and economic reforms in Russia. These programs already are funded. They can provide immediate and tangible results for the Russian people. We will invest in the growth of Russia's private sector through 2 funds to accelerate privatization and to lend to new, small, private businesses. We will resume grain sales to Russia and extend $700 million in loans for Russia to purchase American grain. We will launch a pilot project to help provide housing and retraining for the Russian military officers as they move into jobs in the civilian economy. Because the momentum for reform must come upward from the Russian people, not down from their government, we will expand exchanges between American farmers, business people, students, and others with expertise working directly with the Russian people. And we agreed to make a special effort to promote American investment particularly in Russia's oil and gas sectors. To give impetus to this effort, we will ask Vice President Gore and Russian Prime Minister Chernomyrdin to chair a new commission on energy and space. Second, beyond these immediate programs, the President and I agreed that our partnership requires broader perspectives and broader cooperative initiatives, which I will discuss with the Congress when I return home. We expect to do more than we are announcing today in housing and technical assistance, in nuclear safety and cooperation on the environment, and in important exchanges. Third, this challenge we face today is clearly not one for the United States and Russia alone. I have asked our allies in the G7 to come forward with their own individual bilateral initiatives. Canada and Britain have already done so, and I expect others to follow. President Yeltsin and I also discussed plans for the G7 nations to act together in support of Russia's reforms. The foreign and finance ministers of the G7 are meeting in Tokyo on April 14th and 15th. Coordinated efforts are required to help Russia stabilize its economy and its currency. The President and I agreed that Russia and the G7 nations must take mutually reinforcing steps to strengthen reform in Russia, and those will be announced on the 14th and 15th in Tokyo. Beyond these economic initiatives, the President and I discussed a broad agenda of cooperation in foreign affairs. We reaffirmed our commitment to safe dismantlement and disposal of nuclear weapons. We discussed the need to strengthen the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to assure that Ukraine, along with Belarus and Kazakhstan, ratify the START Treaty and accede to the NPT as non-nuclear weapons states. I stressed that we want to expand our relationships with all the new independent states. We also agreed to work in concert to help resolve regional crises, to stem weapons of proliferation, to protect the global environment, and to address common challenges to international peace, such as the tragic violence in Bosnia, advancing the promising peace talks we have co-sponsored in the Mideast, and continuing our cooperation to end the regional conflicts of the Cold War era. Many of the dreams Americans and Russians hold for their children and for generations to come rest on the long-term success of Russia's reforms, and thus on the long-term partnerships between our two nations. Our new democratic partnership can make a historic contribution for all humanity well into the next century. Both of us know that it requires effort and vigilance to make progress along the path toward democracy's ideals. And I believe we both see those ideals as rooted deeply in the human spirit. I think of the words of one of the great poets of democracy within our own country, Walt Whitman. In a poem about crossing the East River in New York, where the Brooklyn Bridge now stands, he commands, "Flow on, river, flow on." Of course, the river hardly required his permission. It has flowed on for centuries and will continue to, whether old Walt Whitman decreed it or not. Yet he bellowed his enthusiastic support for the river's timeless journey. Russia's struggle for democracy and America's support are much the same. We know that the attraction to freedom that animates democracy flows powerfully through the human spirit like a river. Our words do not cause that river to flow, and history has now proven that in the long run, no tyrant can cause the river to stop. Yet we bellow our support because it is right and because democracy's river can carry both our nations toward a better future. As we have looked out across the Pacific to the shores of Russia in its Far East, over the last 2 days we have committed ourselves anew to that journey. I now return to the United States with a reaffirmed commitment to that course and a determination to engage members of Congress in both parties and the American people in a rededication to the prospect that a successful and strong and democratic Russia is very much in the best interest of America and the world.
Прежде всего, я хочу поблагодарить
First of all, I should like to thank
господина президента за те добрые слова, которые
Mr.
сказаны в
President,
адрес
for
России.
your kind
Я
words
хочу поблагодарить
addressed to Russia. I should like to thank
премьер-министра Канады господина Малруни
Canada's
за
Prime
отличную
Minister,
организацию встречи
Mr.
на
Mulrooney,
высшем
for
уровне
the
двух президентов
excellent
двух великих
way in
держав.
which this summit
Я
of
хочу
two
поблагодарить
presidents
народ
of two
Ванкувера
great powers
за
was
то, что он
organized.
так приветлив,
I'd like to
за
thank
то, что он
the
так
people
встречал
of Vancouver for being so
наши делегации,
hospitable, for
и
having
нас,
so
президентов.
warmly welcomed our
Я хочу
delegations
поблагодарить
and us
журналистов,
personally, the
которые,
presidents. I
по-моему,
should like to thank
круглосуточно
the journalists who,
дежурили
it seems to me,
на
kept
своих
a
рабочих местах.
round-the-clock watch at their
Я
posts.
полностью удовлетворен
I am fully
итогами и атмосферой
satisfied
рабочей
by the results
встречи
and by
с
the
президентом
spirit and
Биллом
atmosphere of my encounter
Она была во
with
всех
President Bill
отношениях
Clinton.
неординарной.
It was, in all
Такой ее
senses,
сделали
out of
события
the
в мире,
ordinary,
Процессы в Соединенных
but it
Штатах
was
и
made
в России,
extraordinary
особые отношения,
by
сложившиеся
processes
у нас
transpiring in the United
Биллом
States and
Клинтоном
Russia,
еще с июня прошлого
conditioned by
года.
very special
президенты мы
relationships
встретились
developing
вчера в первый
between
раз,
ourselves and Mr.
но
Bill Clinton.
партнерами
We met for the
стали
first
еще
time,
с
but
той
yesterday,
встречи
but
в
became
Вашингтоне.
partners back at that meeting in Washington.
Когда Билл Клинтон
When
стал
Bill
президентом,
Clinton
у нас
became
быстро
president,
установился хороший рабочий
we
контакт.
rapidly established good
телефону.
working contacts
Мы
over the
откровенно
telephone.
обсуждали самые сложные
We
вопросы
candidly
и
discussed
сразу
the most
договорились,
intricate
что в
issues
нашем диалоге не
and
будет
stated
пауз,
at the outset
и мы
that there would be no pauses in our dialogue
быстро
and
найдем
that we
время
would rapidly
встретиться
manage to find
и
time to meet
определили это
and
заранее
establish
за
that
несколько месяцев.
right at the beginning, as I say,
Мы не имели права откладывать личную
several
встречу.
months ago. We had no
Тревожен и
right
неспокоен
to
мир,
further postpone a
вышедший
personal
израненный
encounter
из холодной
in
войны,
the face
и
of
судьбы
this
его во многом
world
зависят от того,
emerging from
что
a
происходит в двух
wounded
великих странах,
past,
России и
its
США.
thoughts
От того, как
preoccupied
складываются
by
отношения между ними.
what is occurring in two great countries, the
сразу
United
нашли
States
общий язык в
and
Ванкувере.
Russia. We immediately
Наверное, это
found
потому,
common
что мы
language in
оба
Vancouver,
люди
probably
делали в то
because
время
we're both
в какой-то
business-like
степени
people
идеалисты.
and at the same time, to some
Мы оба
extent,
верим в то, что
idealists
свобода,
both.
демократия,
We
свободный
also
выбор
believe
народа
that
— это не
freedom,
просто слова,
democracy,
и
and freedom of
готовы
choice for
бороться
people
за
are not
свои
mere words
убеждения.
and are prepared to
Мы
struggle
понимаем, что
for our beliefs.
Всё в мире
We understand
взаимозависимо,
that
что
everything that happens in the
сотрудничество — это
world
не
is
только
interlinked, that cooperation is not concession-making, but a vital necessity, a contribution to our future.
Речь была в основном о
At
демонтаже
previous
старых
meetings,
конфронтационных
the nation's
структур.
leaders discussed primarily the
Мы занимались строительством
disassembly of confrontational structures, but here in Vancouver, we talked about building the new, laying the foundations of a future economy. This was the first economically oriented meeting of the two great powers. We adopted some signal decisions in the interests of the people of the Russian Federation, in the interests of the people of the United States of America, in the interests of the world's people. We decided to eliminate discriminatory limitations on trade with Russia. We, in fact, said that we were simply hurt. America had embarked upon the path of democracy, whereas America was still treating us as though we were a communist country. In fact, we're struggling against communism. I stated that quite clearly, and Bill Clinton agreed. We are prepared to compete, but compete honestly. We decided to alter our approach to trade in Russian uranium, space technology, access to Russian military technology. We decided to do away with the Jackson-Vanik Amendment and to resolve other legislative issues. There's considerably greater interest on the part of American investors in the fuel sector, in Russia, space technology. We decided to cooperate in this area and decided to join forces. We, the U.S. and Russian administrations, our encounter, the economic package of Bill Clinton. This is what it's going to be called from here on in. Bill Clinton's economic package is predicated on the fact that America wishes to see Russia prosper with a blooming economy. America intends to support Russian entrepreneurs, particularly small and medium farmers, Russia's youth.
Все это поддержка российских реформ, стратегический союз с нами, подчеркнул Билл Клинтон. Уже сейчас на эти проекты развития выделяются средства в размере 1 миллиард 600 миллионов долларов. Это дело самого ближайшего будущего. Мы обсудили и дальнейшие, более масштабные шаги,
$1.6 billion. We're looking forward to other steps to be undertaken by the United States of America and other major industrial countries to support real reform in Russia. The linkage between that set of measures and other political measures was avoided. Of course, military and political problems could not be skirted. We discussed what might be done to see to it that all participants in the Bosnian conflict support the UN position. Here, our positions match as to the main points. We devoted quite a lot of attention to problems of non-proliferation. We decided to extend our agreements on the avoidance of accidents, such as the near accident involving submarines very recently. We decided to strengthen cooperation between various areas of the military. All of this is reflected in the Vancouver Declaration. Some of the principal elements of that declaration. Members of our delegation felt that the U.S. side did appreciate that support for Russia had to be timely. Our partners make it their goal to support Russia's reforms, which are not yet yielding major results as far as ordinary Russians are concerned. The meeting in Vancouver signals a shift from general assurances of support to Russia to pragmatic, specific, nitty-gritty projects. What we see dominating here are economic and not military strategic issues dominant. Another very important result is that we, with President Bill Clinton, did establish some pretty close personal contacts. Bill Clinton is a serious partner. He is prepared to tackle the major problems confronting our two countries in the interests of our two countries, in the interests of all free people throughout the world. I have invited Bill Clinton to visit Moscow, to render us an official visit at a time convenient to himself. Thank you very much.
Whether Russia and the United States will continue to point nuclear weapons at each other, or whether that's something that you don't need to do anymore.
We did discuss that, and we discussed that within the framework of the START agreements and the timetables established for them, and we agreed that we would re-examine that at a fairly early time. We did not resolve that issue, but we agreed to take it up again.
What guarantees are there that it will be delivered this time when it wasn't last year?
I'd like to point out
Микрофона надо говорить.
You have to use the mic.
he asked if you would go to the microphone so they could get the Russian translation. I'm sorry. You all see the microphones.
A question, Mr. President, for you and President Yeltsin. Much of Bill Clinton's economic package is old wine in new bottles, in that it's money that was previously authorized and appropriated by Congress. Why will it make a difference now, more of a difference now than it would have when it was approved last year? And what guarantees are there that it will be delivered this time when it was not when originally approved?
I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, the nature of this package is, I think, somewhat different than the one which was discussed last year. First, three quarters of this money will be distributed, not government to government, but will go to benefit the private sector, the emerging private sector in Russia, and will go outside of the central apparatus in terms of supporting privatization, helping to start new businesses, establishing a democracy core at a really significant level. If you look at all the things that are down here, they are very specific, they are tangible, they are designed to develop concrete benefits for the people who will be involved. And as President Yeltsin reiterated to me in our last meeting, in each of these categories, we have a proven mechanism for distributing the assistance so that we know how to get the money to its intended purpose. Second point I would like to make is that we intend for this to be leveraged in two ways. First, because I intend now to go back to the Congress, to the leaders of both parties with whom I met extensively before I came here, and discuss a second package of bilateral assistance, which will be more aggressive in the areas of energy and environmental cleanup, areas which will be dramatically helpful in supporting the economy of Russia, and more aggressive in the whole issue of housing for returning soldiers, which is a very important issue socially and politically as well as economically in the country, and in several other areas. And we have asked the other G7 countries each to do something on their own, and those messages are coming in now. And finally, I would remind you that we want a different kind of multilateral agreement to come out of Tokyo. That is, last year when the figure $24 billion was floated all across the United States and the world and Russia, a lot of it was contingent on all kinds of things which never happened and could not reasonably have been expected to happen. We are going to try to make sure that anything we say will be done, in fact, will be done, and that will be a big difference. Mr. President? Yes, it's his turn.
I should like to stress a major difference between that which was decided upon in the past and that which was decided upon, economically speaking, in Bill Clinton's economic package. First, a close linkage to specific sectors in terms of sums earmarked, which will enable us to monitor the expenditure of each and every line item. Second, a close connection to deadlines, which had never been done in the past. The figure of $24 billion was moved, say, by the year 2000. That was a writer sometimes. But now we've stated the 25th of April, 27th of April, 1st of May, the month of May, the month of June, the month of September, the month of October, and throughout the remainder of 1993. That is the principal set of differences. Boris Nikolaevich, you somewhat anticipated what I had intended to ask. I see here a clear break in the type of assistance being rendered to reform, about which so much had been said by way of lip service in the past. So what do you expect of the G7 meeting in Tokyo then? Reform, of course, is proceeding, but it's a young reform process. It's really only a year old. It's only for a year that we had reform underway in Russia. Now, in that 1 year, we have had 60,000 private enterprises set up. In over 70 years, not a single one was established. We must remember that over 50,000 major stockholding companies in that 1 year. These are perhaps minor successes, but they are signal successes nonetheless. But of course, certain quarters are putting on brakes on the process. Russia tends to run out of breath from time to time. It needs a transition period, a breather of, say, 2 years, and in that period of breather, we need this kind of support, not aid, I would stress, not even assistance, but support, because in supplying food, technologies, goods, etc., you do create additional workplaces, additional jobs in the United States of America, additional use of American industrial plant capacity, a fuller use of U.S. economic potential. So these are not Christmas presents, I put it to you. Not at all. This is policy and major policy making, I put it to you. Thank you.
Борис Николаевич и президент Клинтон, вы оба
President
говорили, что
Yeltsin,
вы
President
преданы демократии, но вы
Clinton,
в том
all
числе,
indicated
что вы
your devotion to
оба преданы
democracy,
демократии, но вы оба идеалисты.
but that
Мы же слышим
you're
здесь очень
both
прагматический,
idealist at the same time. But what we're hearing about right now is a very pragmatic, a very down-to-earth set of measures, a very down-to-earth program. Now, President Yeltsin, how is this assistance to be rendered to particular sectors? You've indicated that there's a definite time, place for delivery of the assistance. Now, you've also indicated that jobs will be created in America. But what will actually happen on the ground, so to speak, in Russia? Let's say we're going to spend 300 billion rubles on health in Russia. That will reach every single Russia. 100 million in medicines. That will reach every Russian. Technology. After all, new technologies will generate new consumer goods for each and every Russian. Everything is people-oriented. This is Bill Clinton's policy. It is Yeltsin's policy. That is that we work for people's benefit, for the benefit of each and every free individual.
What assurances do you have from President Yeltsin that this medicine, this food, these housing guarantees, that any of this can really be delivered through a system that we've been told is very bureaucratic and somewhat corrupt? And what assurances have you given him that there won't be log jams on the American side? And could you tell us, do you agree with his opening statement that there is agreement here between the two leaders about ending the Jackson-Vanik Amendment and about the technology transfers through COCOM?
Let me answer the first question first. On the delivery systems, we have reached a tentative agreement pending the acquiescence by other G7 countries. I say that because I have not had a chance to discuss this with any of them. That there were log jams in the past, both within the government agencies of the United States and other countries, and within Russia itself. And that we have now asked in a very carefully coordinated fashion all the G7 to do two things: to commit to more bilateral assistance in terms of development and partnership, and to work for a multilateral development package. So we have tentatively agreed, the two of us have, but again I say nobody else has agreed to this, that we should establish a coordinating office in Moscow to make sure, number one, that each of us in the G7 does what we promised to do on time, without delay, and number two, that our efforts are coordinated within Russia, both so that we are not in conflict with each other and so that the money can actually go where it is supposed to go. So we devoted quite a bit of time to the whole business of implementation. As to your second question, we discussed Jackson, Vanik, COCOM, and a number of other issues. And I told President Yeltsin that in my meetings with the Congress before I left, we agreed that certain members of Congress with an interest in this, I might add in both parties, would actually compile a list of every one of the Cold War legislative and other restrictions that are still being applied to Russia, even though it is now a democratic state. That I would listen to President Yeltsin on these issues, and that I would then return home and we would make as many changes as we could. With regard specifically to Jackson Vanik, I think the issue there is whether it's a fact question from my point of view. Are there any more people who wish to immigrate who have not been allowed to? The President says he doesn't think so. He's going to look into that. I'm going to go back and raise that issue with Congress along with the COCOM issue and a whole range of others. And I would expect within a matter of a few days, we'll be able to give to the American press and public a comprehensive answer to what the position of the administration on that will be. Including that, we're reviewing that too. Go ahead.
Izvestia newspaper. My question is directed both to President Yeltsin and to President Clinton. Goes as follows. The elimination of restrictions on trade with Russia, if that does happen, will perhaps be the harbinger of the establishment of those relationships of partnership which we've been talking about for so long. Now, I'd like to ask you, gentlemen, what particular priority areas are up for partnership and cooperation? And, President Clinton, how do you feel? Are there particular areas which the U.S. might like to stress in building up business cooperation with the Russians? On that first point, I should like to say that we discussed something like 50 issues yesterday and today, and practically all of those issues had to do with partnership. We would not manage to tackle any one of those issues if we were not partners, if we were rivals in each other's eyes, adversaries in each other's eyes. No, we are partners and future allies. That was the way our relationship unfolded. That's the way the negotiations went. That's the way we went about resolving issues. And in discussing those approximately 50 issues, we didn't sweep anything under the table. We didn't set anything aside. We decided either to pass them on for further investigation and analysis, or else we resolve them on the spot.
I'd like to answer the question also and respond to what President Yeltsin said. Among the areas in which the United States sees real opportunity for joint activity are energy, space, the environment, nuclear safety. These are some of the areas that we believe we can work together on in ways that would benefit Russia economically in a very short time and also be beneficial for the United States. Over and above that, we discussed but did not settle on a range of possible actions that we could take to make private investment in Russia more attractive to American investors. Because after all, in the end, a market economy is built by private investment and not just public investment alone. Second point I'd like to make in response to the comment by President Yeltsin, we did discuss a phenomenal number of issues. I think it's fair to say we discussed more issues than either one of us thought we would when we came here. We did not agree on everything. You would not expect the leaders of two great nations, even in partnership, to have total agreement. But we did come to agreement on how we would handle these issues, how we would try to work through our disagreements, and what we would do in the future. And I appreciated the extreme candor with which President Yeltsin treated all our discussions, including those areas where there is still some gap between our two positions. Wolf?
I have a question, a two-part question, one for each of you. Mr. President, on the irritant that, another irritant in the U.S.-Russian relationship that was pointed out to us yesterday by your communications director, George Stephanopoulos, the patrolling off the Russian coasts by U.S. submarines. What have you agreed to now to prevent these kinds of accidents from recurring down the road? Is this another case of old habits dying hard, that the U.S. still finds a need to keep these kinds of submarines off the Russian coast? And for President Yeltsin, An irritant in the U.S.-Russian relationship is the slow withdrawal of Russian troops from the Baltic States and from Eastern Europe. Are you committed to withdrawing the Russian soldiers as quickly as possible from those independent nations?
Let me answer first. I don't mind saying to this whole assemblage that I told President Yeltsin I very much regretted the submarine incident, that I had ordered a thorough review of the incident as well as the policy of which the incident happened to be an unintended part, and that I would, as soon as that review was completed, I would engage Russia at the appropriate levels to discuss whether the policy should be changed and where we should go from here. That was a regrettable thing, and I don't want it to ever happen again.
On the first point, I'd add just a couple of words. We did agree that somewhere late in May or early in June, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Grachov, would visit the United States of America to discuss the entire gamut of issues of this sort, including close passage of submarines, so that such incidents might be avoided in the future. Now, in regard to withdrawal of troops from the Baltic states, we are adhering very closely to the schedule on troop withdrawals from Lithuania, and we are completing work on that schedule since Lithuania does not violate human rights and treats the Russian-speaking population fairly. If Latvia and Estonia violate human rights, if their laws are presently so structured that, in fact, some national minorities continue to be persecuted, and that involves basically Russians, we, having, on the whole, adopted a political decision, a policy decision to withdraw troops from those states, we will be scheduling the actual withdrawal in line with what they decide in the human rights area. Intertas, I have a question that I'd like to address to President Yeltsin and also to President Clinton. President Yeltsin, you indicated that Bill Clinton's economic package lays the groundwork for partnership between the United States of America and Russia and will provide considerable impetus to the reform process in Russia. In April, we're going to have a referendum in Russia. How, here today in Vancouver, would you forecast the situation unfolding on the basis of agreements reached here in Canada? Now, President Clinton, the personal factor is a major element in policy, in politics. Now, what would you indicate by way of your personal contact with President Yeltsin in regard to the referendum? That's our internal domestic issue. Whether it will be impacted directly or indirectly is another issue, but it's up to us to deal with the referendum issue. It's up to us to work with our people. It's up to us to persuade the citizens of the Russian Federation that if they do not vote in favor of confidence on the 25th of April, they will be dealing a major blow not only upon Russia, but also upon the United States of America, upon the other countries of the world. This would be a loss to democracy, a loss to freedom, a rollback to the past, a return to the communist yoke, something which is entirely inadmissible.
Reaction to President Yeltsin, based on these 2 days, is first that he is very much what he seems to be. He is a person who rose from humble beginnings, who has never forgotten where he came from. And second, that his enduring virtue is that he trusts the Russian people. The great courage involved in all democracies is that in the end you have to trust the people, including you have to trust the people if they decide to throw you out. You have to trust the people. Boris Yeltsin has put the faith of the government of Russia into the hands of the people of Russia. That is a unique thing in your history. There are few nations in the world that have the spirit, the culture, the richness that the Russian people can claim, and yet for too long they were never given control over their own destiny. My belief is that deep down inside he actually does trust all the people who live in those communities in the 12 time zones that make up Russia, and that is a very great thing. Yes.
Mr. President and Mr. President, this is Cairo Television, Seattle, and definitely we are interested if there is any part of the package which deals with Russia's Far East and Pacific Northwest of the United States of America as far as economic reform and development is concerned, and people-to-people relationships in particular.
Yes, we agree to have a substantial increase in the exchanges of people, particularly in the area of increasing the number of people we might bring to this country for training in business management, and big increases in student exchanges, and a whole range of other things, including agriculture and other areas that we are still going to identify. But I think, let me say that it is easy to minimize such things because they often do not cost as much money as some other parts of a long-term development package. But no one who has lived through the second half of the 20th century could possibly be blind to the enormous impact of exchange programs on the future of countries. You know, when I was a young man, I worked for the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Fulbright. There is a scholarship program that carries his name that literally, in my judgment, has changed the whole direction of policy in country after country after country. So I believe this is a very important thing, and I'm going to do everything I can to see that there is a major, major increase in the number of broad-gauged exchanges, and I might say I think that has great support in the United States Congress.
I'd like to add a few words to that. This package, which I would like to call a very large and wise package, which is going to make history, involves yet another question mark, and that is that of assisting the natives, the native populations in the northern reaches of Russia. It's a very, very important issue to tackle, that one.
President Yeltsin, you want to comment something?
Микрофон.
Microphone, please. Microphone.
Okay, I am from France, Francuski, the Trietzi Canal. I would like to know what is your deep feeling, because everybody tries to help you, and I think everybody is right to help you because you represent democracy. But the question I will ask you is that after you, do you think there is an alternative that maybe our American friends, President Clinton, has been obliged to think about in case your enemies, your adversary, oust you from power after the referendum on 25th of April?
My first point to that would be this. I intend to do everything in my power, and by the way, I do believe in the Russian people making its proper choice on the 25th of April. At the moment, today I say, there is no alternative to Yeltsin. Perhaps there will be one tomorrow, but certainly not today.
If I were on the ballot, I would make exactly the same statement. Let me say, the answer to your question is simple, I think. I have made it clear that the United States is committed to democracy, to human rights, to market economics, to reducing the nuclear threat, to respecting national sovereignty of the other newly independent states. We have interests and values. They are embodied by the policies and the direction of President Yeltsin. They are enduring. He is the duly elected president of Russia, and as long as he is, I intend to work with him and support him because he reflects those enduring values. Yes, in the back. Please. No, you got to run.
As she's walking, we have the Vesti news program. Some of our mics are working, some not. I have a question to the President of Russia. The overall sum of this assistance is perhaps not so great. For example, when we had the Los Angeles riots, we had a package twice that size set up. Now, what sort of projects in Russia do you think will yield the most immediate results and will have the greatest impact socially in the short run? I feel that we do not need astronomical figures, headline-making figures. What we need are real figures. These are real figures which are doable, which are implementable in terms of things that we can do. Well, what specific projects would you regard as the most effective ones? Well, the first priority would be fuel, which would enable us to replenish, to top up our hard currency reserves. I'm talking about oil and gas. It's revitalization, and we address that topic in very specific terms. The next issue would be immediate delivery of goods to the people.
Mr. Yeltsin, please. Before leaving the United States, Hispanic congressmen requested that you talk about the nuclear plant of Cienfuegos in Cuba, trying to get the commitment of Mr. Yeltsin not to continue or not to help in continuing the construction of that plant. Did you get that commitment? And for Mr. Yeltsin, I would like to know if you have a timetable for finishing the withdrawal of troops, Soviet troops from Cuba.
First of all, let me say that the day of massive subsidies between Russia and the government of Cuba is over. The lion's share of the trade which exists now between Russia and Cuba is a market-based trade. There is a nuclear facility being constructed there. The United States is concerned about it. We've expressed our concern about it. That was basically the extent of our discussions here at this meeting.
So there was not any commitment?
In regard to troop withdrawals, we have already initiated that withdrawal and are now finalizing a schedule for the final withdrawal of troops.
One more? Yes.
Nothing in terms of a specific timetable. I have a question for President Clinton. Mr. President, even today, I think we can foretell that President Yeltsin's opponents will certainly be accusing him of making unilateral political concessions in exchange for Clinton's package. Perhaps we could anticipate their commentary and respond to that question even today. I'm from the Today newspaper, the newspaper Сегодня. Thank you very much.
First of all, I do not believe it would be fair to say that President Yeltsin made a lot of political concessions in return for the commitments made by the United States. We did clarify some positions on some issues, and I felt better about it, but basically everything President Yeltsin said in our private meetings was consistent with the direction in which he has tried to lead Russia since he has been president. Secondly, I would remind you that the United States also has taken some steps that have nothing to do with money to try to reinforce the fact that we consider this a partnership of two great nations, that we want to work in partnerships. That's why I agreed to a comprehensive review of all the Cold War statutes and other limitations on our relationships with Russia. That's why I went out of my way to tell the President in our very first meeting how much I regretted the incident of the submarine bumping and how I was committed to reviewing our policy and to getting back with him on that. So I would say that President Yeltsin's opponents might want to characterize this meeting in that way, but it would not be a fair characterization. In fact, it would be a distortion of the conversation that we had.
I am not frightened of possible reprimands or reproaches from the opposition because I see no single matter upon which it could hang such an accusation. There's nothing in any of the documents, there's nothing in what was said between us.
Thank you very much. We have to quit.
Спасибо.
Саша,